folks. It is a very chilly evening out there this evening. It's about -22, but it was a beautiful day. In fact, I got to drive through the Alberta Peace Country into the BC Peace Country, back around into Alberta. I had to go up through Dawson Creek and around to Baytree, and that is a homesteading haven over there. There's lots of folks appear to be living, off-grid or semi-off-grid. There's lots of self-constructed homes. There's lots of even like conversion-style homes. Like there's some buses. I even seen a boat, like a big houseboat that I think they're living in. So that was pretty cool. Anyway, so that got me thinking. So there's been a huge call to the homesteading lifestyle has brought in a lot of people over the course of 2020 and into 2021 here. And with that comes a lot of folks asking about homesteading community. And homesteading community is a lot different than a homesteading committee. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today. Lots of folks have been putting the question out there. Well, what if we were able to find a piece of land and get a bunch of like-minded individuals together? We all pool our money and we buy this piece of land and we have a homesteading community on this one land. Well, that's fantastic. Not a bad idea to have a homesteading community, but here's how it all comes down to bear. So you buy a piece of land. The county that you're in or the state that you're in likely won't have an issue with shared ownership, but they may have an issue with shared occupancy. So a lot of counties will have restrictions on how many homes or residences you can have on a single piece of land before you're required to legally subdivide that land. Now that's not saying that it can't be done. There's a lot of communities where this does exist. In fact, you only have to look to suburbia to see where homeowners associations have done exactly that. And that is the difference between homesteading with a community versus homesteading by a committee. So there's sacrifice that comes with it, right? So you buy a plot of land, you collectively own it. You have to form somewhat similar to a board of directors, a voting committee. Everything's decided jointly. That's not always conducive to the type of lifestyle you want to live if you're homesteading. The real premise of the homesteading community is that I own a cow, Billy owns a goat, Janine owns chickens, and we're all, we don't all have to be completely self-sustainable, but as a collective community, we're all able to contribute, trade, and barter, and support one another in our efforts. When you do this by committee now, this becomes a challenge because every owned share in that plot of land has a vote, has a say, right? So the things you want to do on your homestead, you may not be able to do because by committee, they've rubber stamped a thing that says you can't do that. And that is one of the things you do see with homeowners associations is that your grass is 1 1/8 inches tall and they say, no, by this bylaw right here that we agreed upon and you signed, it says your grass has to be 1 1/16 inches tall. Now, let's be honest, that's the life we're all trying to escape, is it not? Yeah, absolutely it is. But the real wrench in the engine here is really less about how well people get along, because there's always going to be some dispute, right? People come from very diverse backgrounds. They have different upbringings, different perspectives on a wide variety of things, and how they think that the homesteading community should be governed is going to vary from one home to the next. But no, what's really going to screw you up is a little thing called a land use bylaw, as well as zoning requirements. So if you do this, you buy the piece of land collectively. You decide I don't want to have shared ownership in a 100-acre piece and be allotted 10 acres for use. Instead, I want this to be a legal subdivision and I get 10 acres out of the 100 acres. So the challenge you're going to face there is your homestead actually zoned appropriately for you to have things like chickens, ducks, geese, pigs, cattle, in order to live that self-sustaining lifestyle? And if it is, there's probably a specific number of animal units that you're allowed to have based on the amount of acreage that you have or usable acreage that you have. Some of it might be wetland, some of it might be treed land, and based on the amount of pasture available, they may restrict how much animals you can have and what types of things you can build. The other thing they might say completely is that no, the land you've purchased, you've subdivided, it's now a 10-acre acreage plot. and it is specifically zoned residential, and you may not be able to raise your goats there at all. For argument's sake, let's say best case scenario, the county that you're living in okays your development plan, and they say, yeah, you're good to go. You can either live on a 10-acre plot, or you can collectively own 100 acres and have 10 residences on there, each divided up into 10-acre plots, but there's not going to be any subdivision lines there. You can have your village. That's best case scenario. The next thing that could be a stumbling block for you that you're going to have to be prepared for is things like building codes, plumbing codes, gas codes. As somebody that spends quite a bit of time with folks on the worst day of their life, I will say there's a lot of conversation around whether or not these are guidelines or whether or not they're really applicable to things like off-grid homes or tiny homes. As somebody that spends a lot of time with folks on the worst day of their life, I will say the codes are really there to protect people from their own worst decisions. And if you're taking shortcuts with stuff like that, you really kind of got to look your kids in the eye and say, you know what, we may have a house fire in 3 or 4 years, you know, and I'm okay with that right now. So you've got to reconcile yourself with the risk, and that's the one thing the codes are there to kind of lower that risk level down significantly. Another one of those codes specifically deals, the plumbing code deals specifically with things like sewer and septic. There's going to be very prescriptive rules on what you have to do for sewage management. And as you can imagine, if you're living in a community, there's nothing that would create conflict faster than if your neighbor's septic is pumping out in towards your garden where the food that you feed your family is growing. That would not be good at the board meeting. So another thing that you might need to look into if you're exploring the option of homesteading by committee versus by community, which is, you know, where you have the land collectively owned, is a very clearly defined set of terms as to how you deal with conflict resolution. Because when people get disgruntled in that co-joined piece of land, how do you resolve that? Because if you want to pull out of it because you can't get along with Billy, well, it's going to be really hard to sell that because you're selling a share in something that's much bigger than what your specific assets are. And who's going to come in and buy that? That's, you know, you've got to market that to a very specific person, somebody with a very specific set of values that wants to live a very specific lifestyle, and that can be very challenging. Anyways, big picture, I don't want to discourage anybody that is looking to acquire a large plot of land and purchase it with a group of other like-minded individuals. I just would hate to see anybody get into that and then realize it's not for them, and it all go awry, and the trials of what is supposed to be kind of a utopian thing turn into someone's nightmare. So whatever you're doing on your homestead, I wish you the very best of success. If you got any questions, concerns, comments, drop them down below. I'll do my best to answer them. But for now, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to fix up a cup of tea. I'll see you tomorrow.